I'll be honest, Season 2 of Black Mirror is pretty hit or miss. It's got some fantastic episodes in it, including my personal favorite, but it also has some of the more forgettable episodes in Black Mirror. And unfortunately, the first episode of Season 2, titled Be Right Back, is very dull. I mean, it's not bad or anything, I just wouldn't consider it that great of an episode either. The story focuses on a couple that live a pretty normal life, and when tragedy strikes, a new service becomes available that allows people to stay in touch with the dead. Something is pretty off about them though. That's the episode in a nutshell, and I really tried hard not to spoil anything, but honestly everything happens within the first few minutes anyway, so I didn't really spoil much. For a quick review, I'd say that it's quite bland and forgettable because nothing happens for a vast majority of the episode. Honestly, it makes me sad that this episode is so boring because I feel like it had some wonderful ideas behind it. They just weren't executed very well. I'll get into it later, but for now, I'd say that this was an episode with great ideas and really good potential, but they just weren't executed very well, unfortunately making this an instant skip from me. Going further in depth with this episode brings me to the conclusion that they just played things really safe. It only showed how the husband cyborg interacted with his wife rather than other people. The idea of this episode was to present a world in which should a loved one die, they could be easily implemented into an AI cyborg and things could, in theory, go back to normal. What this episode shows, of course, is how things don't always go back to normal, and I think that this episode shows this very well. While this human cyborg is freakishly accurate in terms of how he looks and acts, hell, there's even some improvements in things that he was lacking before, such as sexual stamina and overall helpfulness, there's something off about him. He doesn't portray things like emotions or humanity naturally, and they feel programmed in, making them feel fabricated and fake. His wife catches on to this quite quickly and begins to resent the AI for not being just like her husband, and after a few attempts to get rid of her fake husband, she decides to just keep him locked up in the attic. The message that this episode was trying to convey is that no matter how advanced technology gets, there's a certain humanity aspect that can't be replicated, and that pursuing the dead and refusing to move on after grief can become an unhealthy obsession with something you can't have. My problem with this episode is not in its idea, it's in its execution. This idea is just too big to fit into a 50-minute episode and would have been better off as a movie. Due to obvious time restraints, there's no chemistry between the two actors and there isn't enough time to make his death feel impactful. You're supposed to feel bad like she just lost the love of her life, and yet I felt it was a little overdramatic. Not saying the acting was bad or anything, it was quite great actually, but the overall feel of this episode didn't work for me personally. Another thing is that we didn't get to see enough scenarios with this cyborg human. Him and his wife just kind of stay inside and chat, and I would have loved to see more interaction between their mutual friends or their family. I just felt that due to time constraints, they played this episode really safe, and that's not what Black Mirror is about, man. It's supposed to shock us with the horrific possibilities of technological progression, not play it safe and give us a melodramatic episode that feels cheaply made. Overall, this is my least favorite episode of Season 2 and probably my least favorite of the entire series. It's too bland and the idea wasn't executed very well. Honestly, I'd skip this one and go back to it later because in my opinion, it's quite a bad way to start off Season 2. Thankfully, Episode 2 is here and it would like to show itself off. Next time.